Good morning, everybody. We are going to talk today about how technology has been enabling Capital One to effectively allow customers to do physical transactions in a digital world. Person on the left there is me. I'm Aram Chaminasian. I lead up product for our channels and operations areas, and also our core systems.
I'm Radha Shankaran, and I am the VP of Engineering for our associate and in-person experiences for Retail Bank.
Awesome. All right, so here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with a bit of time on Capital One, and we'll give you a little bit of an overview of the company itself and what we do. And then we'll shift into talking a lot about the work that we've been doing for our customers. And then we'll get into the meat of the solutions that we're looking at, this whole concept of going phygital, and we'll talk about a couple of the ways that we are, a couple of the core principles around that. So let me start with a little bit about Capital One. We are a Fortune 100 company. We've been around since '94. We actually spun off from a smaller bank in Richmond, and now we are one of the top 10 banks in the US by deposits. We have 100 million customers. That's across our entire enterprise. In terms of how we operate, since the beginning of Capital One, we have been a data-first company. We use data to basically drive all of our decisioning, how we actually operate. And it's really the foundation of what's allowed us to do a number of different changes for the industry, which we'll talk about in a bit. And obviously using data requires, as data's continue to scale, we realized that we needed to move to the cloud. We finished that move in 2020, and that's all been led by the foundation of AWS. So today we're going to talk about Capital One Bank, and Radha and I both work in the bank side. It's one of the different lines of business, and we have really three primary products for our consumers. We have a checking product, we have different savings products, and different CDs. And as I mentioned earlier, we're one of the top 10 banks by deposits, and we have 330 branches and cafes. And cafes are basically coffee shops that we use for some level of associate servicing and some marketing pieces. But we don't actually do any sort of physical monetary transactions in cafes. And we have over 1,800 ATMs that through both our own and partnerships. So we have this mission of changing banking for good. And what does that mean? Really at the core of Capital One. And we declared this mission, I think it was around 10 years ago, that we wanted to change banking, right? And what did that mean? We wanted to change banking for our customers. We wanted to change banking as how we operate as a bank, and we wanted to change the industry. And this has led to a number of different innovations. Most recently, we led the charge to drop all overdraft fees. That was a huge shift that's happened across the industry now, but Capital One's the ones that pioneered that. We continue to have free checking products. We continue to be the leader in availability of funds for our customers and really enabling them to transact more easily with us. And all of this is a drive to focus on our customer. And when we look at how our customers are operating with us today, this chart, this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, right? There's been a consistent rise in digital transactions. We use PayPal here as a proxy. If you look at cell phone adoption, right? Over the last 10 years, I think it was around 35% of customers or people had cell phones back about 10 years ago. Now 85% have smartphones. And obviously when you have that level of computing capability in your hands, you're going to see a much broader adoption of digital transactions. And we've seen that in the banking industry on a whole bunch of different dimensions, whether it's people just using digital banking in general, or things like Zelle or Venmo or PayPal. Now, despite this, there is a huge consolidation of where customers actually bank, and that's centered around where these top 4 banks that have the largest in-footprint locations. It's actually really interesting. So if you actually look at these top 4 banks, they have around 300 million customers. The next 100 banks have about the same. right? Just over 300 million customers. And that is, that's not actually changing. If you actually look at where these banks continue to invest, they are continuing to invest in more and more physical locations because for a bunch of reasons, but there's a comfort factor of being able to do in-person transactions. And one of the big reasons for that is cash. If you actually look at the usage of cash, now there was a pretty big drop in cash usage when COVID hit. Like a lot of people stopped transacting in it, but cash still continues to play a huge role in our society. There's kind of three big use cases for cash. You see it predominantly in small dollar transactions. There are entire ecosystems of the banking industry that operate in completely cash spaces. And then there's the underserved community and folks that have, want the anonymity of cash, the ability to transact in that way. Now, we expect cash to continue to decline at around a rate of about 3% per year. So cash will continue to be quite big. Now, when you think about dealing with cash, what we have seen is that customers really love the safety and security feeling of an in-person transaction. And this is a quote from one of our customers that even with ATMs, they get nervous about going to ATMs, right? There's a lack of physical connection. You don't know who's looking over your shoulder. There's these concepts of skimmers and lots of fraud that seems to happen there. And so the kind of security of in-person continues to play a big role. Now, Capital One is structured in a way that we have what we call in-footprint. So just a little bit of history. When Capital One started banking, we acquired 3 different banks with physical locations along the East Coast. So a lot of our traditional customers are in this kind of East Coast, from basically New York down to Louisiana and Texas. However, about 50% of our customers are spread across the US, right? And so that's what we consider to be out of footprint. So they're not within the footprint of our branches, and I think we use roughly like if you're within 50 miles of a branch or something close to that. So for a lot of transactions, this isn't a big deal, right? You see customers that you can still withdraw cash. You can go to an ATM, withdraw cash. You can still deposit a check, mobile deposit. I think most people have seen that. But depositing cash, how do you do that, right? Where do you go to deposit cash? And so what we've seen is that most of our out-of-footprint customers, either they don't have a method to do it, what they end up doing is they go to effectively another bank and deposit cash there and then transfer the money into their account, right? Which isn't ideal. And that leads to issues with funding as well. So this is where we get into this concept of phygital. How do we enable this type of physical transaction in a digital-first footprint? So phygital, the definition here, it's a digital experience that transcends into the physical world. And so what you might think about is things like QR codes, right? I think most folks have seen, I had to use a QR code to scan my menu the other day. I think that the biggest use case I think almost every one of us has used is if you go to the airport, right, and you get your QR code to scan your boarding pass. All of that are things that have continued to evolve, so you don't actually need that ticket. But it's important when we think about this type of transaction that it both seamlessly integrates into our customers' lives and it's trustworthy. So we need to meet the customers where they are, both in terms of where they actually want to bank with us, and we need to meet them where they are emotionally, right? This concept of trust is so critical. And so we wanted things that are available everywhere. We want it to be available anytime. We want it to still be something that hits trust. So the concept of adding a cash in a store really came out of this. And so what we wanted to do was allow customers to deposit their cash at a checkout counter. And we look at retailers as the primary place that we would be able to do this. And so in the product that we have, we allow customers to deposit up to $1,000 a day. And up to $5,000 a month, which is really the primary, it hits on the vast majority of what we have seen as usage of cash in our in-footprint customers. So we felt that was pretty equitable. So we were going to show you a demo, but we couldn't get that to work given different technology limitations. But we will walk you through some quick slides here. The experience is like this. You're a customer. You get into your app. There's a little tile at the bottom there, which is basically allows you to add cash and store. You put in the amount that you're going to deposit. So let's just say you're depositing $50. It gives you a little verification screen. You swipe right, and then you get a barcode. You go to the CVS, you scan that barcode, you hand the $50 to the cashier, and they hand you a receipt, and you're done. So really easy, and we've seen really solid, like we'll get into this a little bit more, but we've seen some pretty amazing adoption from our customers as a result of that. So let's go a little bit deeper on two different parts. The first one we're going to talk about is how do we make it available everywhere? Now, scaling deposits or scaling our in-footprint locations there's a couple of ways that we could have done this. The traditional way of doing this would have been, okay, well, let's continue to build branches everywhere, right? Remember, if you kind of go back, our nearest competitors had, let's say 4,000 branches, and we have 300. So are we going to build another 4,000 branches? That would take, incredibly high fixed costs. You're building this infrastructure. On top of that, you have, to get leases, you got to hire people. It's a real thing. And so that would have taken us probably decades to build out to a network like that. Or we could have acquired other banks, and that has its own integration nightmares that I'm sure you're all familiar with. The other option is ATMs, and we talked about some of the trustworthiness factors there. So what we needed was something that scaled like software, right? But we obviously couldn't do completely digital. So if you think about like the mobile deposit today for checks, you're taking a picture of the check, it goes in, you're good to go. You can't do that with cash, right? You can take a picture of the cash, tear it up. It's probably not going to be the thing that ends up happening. So we needed to have a different type of solution. So we asked ourselves, where do our customers go today? And so we are able to look at, obviously, our customer transaction data, see what types of retailers they tend to utilize the most. And CVS was one that came to the top for us for a bunch of reasons. One, the overlap in terms of footprint of where our customers are and CVS locations was really high. And that's awesome, right? So we know that it's where our customers already are. Second, we know that customers are already going there. So if customers are, hey, look, I'm going to go to the CVS anyway, I've got to go get my prescription, I can also deposit cash, right? I can kill two birds with one stone. And there's this last piece, which is CVSs are open 24/7, right? Or a lot of them are. And so you've suddenly created an in-person network that you don't actually have to be during banking hours, right? Excuse me. So if we look at this and we say, oh, now all of a sudden, Capital One has the most in-footprint location across all of our competitors. In fact, our top two competitors don't have as many locations as we do. Now, obviously, it's not branches, but it's hitting the primary use case that they needed to do. And we can continue to scale this, right? We can continue to add different retailers so that number can go up another 10,000. So I'm going to hand it over to Radha to talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Aram.
Yeah, of course.
And welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. You're bright and early. So from a technology perspective, for us, in order to scale this like software from 0 to 10K, AWS was the perfect solution that we could leverage because it helped us to very quickly develop, iterate closely with our product partners, deploy and test, and get it from an MVP solution all the way to a nationally viable solution. And Income we chose as a payment or a point of sale partner, primarily, of course, for the fact that they already were integrated with CVS, but it also allowed us to abstract the point of sale from our product, which then now enables us to scale into any of the retailer footprint that Income has integrations with very, very quickly. So that made a lot of sense from our perspective. And then, of course, as I said earlier, with AWS, we could quickly spin up infrastructure and scale it based on the loads that we were experiencing, and allows us to continuously scale this baseline and scale this as we expand our customer base. So as Aram mentioned earlier, right, this is extremely important for us to make it to be trustworthy in our solution. It was important that it is available everywhere as well. Not just being available 24/7, but truly making this work flawlessly. Because as we all know, we're talking about people's prized possessions. This is cash that somebody would use to pay their mortgage, to pay their phone bill, or even to buy groceries. So it was super important and it mattered tremendously for us to make this available and resilient at the same time. So how did we approach this from an architecture perspective? We really took a multi-pronged approach in this, right? So from a data layer perspective, we decided that we would make this active, passive across multiple zones as well as regions, so that we could very quickly fail over in case of an outage. And as most of you heard yesterday, the CEO of Amazon the Web Services, Adam, speak about the benefits and the merits of Aurora Global Database. That is what we chose as our solution, because it was giving us the speeds almost 3x to 5x of what regular RDS databases would give us. And that, again, was extremely important for us to meet our very stringent sub 15 seconds, 15 minutes failover RTOs that we need from a Capital One perspective. The other aspect was really the compute layer. There again, we built it to be active-active across multiple regions so that we could again fail over fairly quickly in terms of outages. So both of those really helped us gain, and leverage the power of AWS from a regional resiliency perspective. What does add cache remaining performant really meant? As Aram mentioned earlier as well, the customer experience was extremely important too in this. So we wanted to make sure that our customers did not spend a lot of time at the register. They were able to come and really quickly deposit their cash, just as they would do in the branches. So here again, we made sure that we build our payment processing asynchronously, so that we were getting consistent response times to meet that customer experience goal that we had. And of course, as all of us who are technologists, we understand with multiple integration points comes multiple failure points as well. And we had to obsess on every single cent, because again, here we are talking about the cash of the customer. So we had a very maniacal focus on ensuring that we monitored each of these points and had alerting in place, leveraging a lot of the out-of-box AWS tools so that we could proactively monitor and be alerted in case of issues and quickly work on them to prevent them from being a big outage. And for me, truly, this is the biggest USP of this product. It brings forth the tremendous partnership between the product team and the technology team to bring an experience at the MVP level itself to our customers that's truly end-to-end. And what I mean by that is typically what we end up doing when we build products is looking at what that front-end customer experience will be, not really thinking that once that happens, how do we ensure the back-end systems are also following suit and actually do what they're supposed to do so that you can prevent servicing calls from the customer eventually. And so we focused not just on taking the cash from the customer, but ensuring that it went all the way down and was deposited into their accounts successfully at the MVP time itself, so that as we scaled, we are actually able to see this in work today as we have deployed this nationally. And it has been a tremendous success from that perspective. So in summary, if we were to look at this, truly thinking outside the branch helped us innovate and solve a critical business and a customer need. Leveraging AWS's cloud-based software solutions, it enabled us to scale and integrate with capabilities that were not possible previously. And this is not the least, but I think the very important aspect is developing that right architecture pattern that was extremely critical for us upfront, so that we were able to meet the availability and the resiliency goals that we had for this product. Thank you, and we are both open for any questions that you may have.